What's going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm your host, blessed to serve you today. I'm not going to put in a bio, because today we're talking about gun makeovers. Like guns that are great for doing makeovers on. Like the plot of some cheesy 90s, 2000s movie where there's the girl they dress up to be all like frumpy, and then at the end they like do some makeover and she's gorgeous. Perhaps you'd call it like, well, I don't even want to promote that show. Anyway, we're talking about giving guns a makeover. Guns that are really good. You could give pretty much any gun a makeover and do some pretty cool stuff to it. But we're talking about guns that really lend themselves and you really get something out of it. Other than just like taking a Glock and making it a Gucci Glock with like some cool pattern. Like really doesn't add anything to the functionality of it. We're talking about actual practical modifications to give guns a little bit of new life. That's what we're talking about today. Again, no bio today because it's not really pertinent. You know, military law enforcement stuff's really not pertinent to this episode. I'm going to skip it for today. You've probably heard it before. If this is not your first rodeo here, I would encourage you to consider liking, subscribing, and commenting on the show. Somehow, with some algorithm or something, it helps people find the show. So if you like the show, help other people find the show. Leave a review. Hit some stars. Whatever the, way that you do that is on whatever app you're listening on. I'd appreciate that. I really would. All right, let's get into it with the gun that got me thinking about this. One of the guys in the chat has a Mossberg 55, if you want to look that up. We were talking about that today on Patreon. And this is a whole family. There are many guns like this. Actually, my first firearm that I ever had was not this same model, but very similar. But it's the whole genre of bolt-action shotguns. Bolt-action shotguns. You talk about a utilitarian workhorse that, from yesteryear that was just known for putting meat on the table. These are it, baby. These are just utilitarian. Call them kind of ugly, retro chic. They're just... You might think they're good looking. They're kind of hideous, but their kind of beauty lies in their simplicity. You probably know how rugged and robust bolt actions are. Well, here's a bolt action shotgun. Are they as high a rate of fire as a semi-auto or even a pump action? No. But for hunting, they have a reasonable rate of fire. A lot of these are not coveted. A lot of these are really, really beat up and dinged up. Now, if you happen to find one in really pristine condition, which is unlikely, because again, these were not expensive guns to start with. They were utilitarian. But if you find one in like primo condition, you might want to keep it if you're a gun collector, or leave it for somebody that is a gun collector. But mostly these are going to be, if it was like the one that I had, worn out, pitted, wood stock looked like it got drugged behind a truck. Just really beat up. That was my first shotgun, was a little bolt action 410. Great gun. Hunted all kinds of stuff with that gun. Was blessed to be able to pass that down to my nephew because it was passed down to me by my uncle. Grew up putting meat on the table with that shotgun. There are a lot of those out there, and a lot of them again are beat up. Now, there were some guns that were more practical than others. If you can find one of the ones with the adjustable chokes, I don't know why this fell out of favor, but there was Mossberg, maybe some other companies too, but there was a choke that was literally you just turn it. And you could adjust different chokes, cylinder or improved cylinder, modified, full, just by twisting on the front of the gun. That's genius. Maybe because they can just charge you more money to sell you different chokes. Maybe that's why, because it didn't make a lot of money, but it made a lot of sense. If you can find one of those models, I'd say leave the barrel like that alone, assuming that choke still works and it isn't like rusted shut. or shot out because somebody shot a bunch of slugs through it when it was all the way tight or something. But assuming it still works, you might just want to keep it like that. But many of these were what was called a goose gun. And this is a gun that was made for a purpose that really doesn't legally exist anymore, because it was for shooting really long range with really large size lead shot, which you can't legally do for waterfowl anymore because now they make you shoot steel shot. I'm not going to get into all the whatever on steel shot, non-toxic shot, whatever. It is what it is. The fact is, this gun was made for a situation that generally does not exist anymore. So this makes a good candidate for modification, for a makeover. Now, legalities. There is nothing illegal about sawing off or cutting the barrel of a shotgun. There is absolutely something very illegal about cutting it below 18 inches in the United States. Laws may vary where you are. But here in the U.S., if you're listening in the U.S., as long as it's above 18 inches, you're good to go. You can cut it. There's nothing that says you can't saw off a shotgun, as long as you don't saw it off past 18 inches. Now, to be safe, I wouldn't get anywhere near 18 inches. I would bare minimum go 18.5. But I actually really like right around a 21-inch barrel for hunting. It's a good length. It doesn't seem to get in the way. You're not really going to lose any velocity. I mean, shotgun shells shoot pistol powder. So you're talking about that length of barrel with, 700X, 800X, whatever powder is in there. And it's a lot handier. So, if you want to do the hacksaw, if you have like a good jig to get a good 90-degree angle, and then clean it up really nice with a file, you can do that. What I think is the better way to do it, though, is just get a pipe cutter and cut it with a pipe cutter. You don't know how to use a pipe cutter, spinning it around a pipe, because what is a shotgun barrel other than basically a pipe? It's a tube, and usually a pretty thin one. So that usually makes a pretty thin, good-looking cut. You may have to clean it up a little bit with a file. You may not even have to do that. But again, don't cut it below 18 inches. I like 20, 21 inches, maybe 22. For some of these have really long, like 30-inch barrels or longer. It's a long barrel. Kind of impractical for today's kind of shotgun shells. So you could cut it down. Probably going to need to refinish it anyway, because again, a lot of these were just beat up. Now there's a lot of really good finishes, but you could just use spray paint. Right? This is not a, $50,000 African drilling side by side. This is a bolt action shotgun. You could just use some really good, like, exterior or grill high temperature black spray paint on the metal. It's not heresy, not going to hurt it. You could spend a little bit more and get some do-it-yourself aerosol type gum finishes, and I've had some really good durability with these kind of finishes, like Durabake, Duracoat, Ceramacoat. There are different brands depending on whether you want to just spray it on or whether you want to bake it. But you can do that. You could also get a couple of different colors and make some cool camo patterns on it. The wood stock that's on it, you can, especially if you want to learn how to do this anyway, it's a good candidate. Just strip it down, get some a lot of that stuff actually, because of the time it was made, it was really good wood. Even if it's been beat up, get it, sand it down, get it uniform, and then just finish it with some True Oil. It's a really good affordable way, or linseed oil, and just refinish the stock, and it might come out looking gorgeous. Or if you want a more tactical look, tactical that out too. And also, while you're at it, since you're taking most of the stuff off, you might want to hollow out the stock. Why? To make it lighter, and two, for pretty cool practical survival applications. Take one of those boring bits and bore out holes that are about the same size as the gauge, so 410, somewhere around a half inch. 20 gauge, 12 gauge are going to be bigger, so you can put an extra shell or two back there. Maybe hollow it out an even bigger cavity so you can put a pull-through bore snake back there, or other supplies. Maybe a small knife. It's a good idea. It's going to make it a little bit lighter anyway. You can put extra stuff back there. Also really good if you want to get a grind-to-fit recoil pad. It's just really good. It lends itself well to a lot of different gun projects. If you cut back and you cut the bead off, they do make a really good, easy solution. Just a snap-on fiber optic bead for those round barrels. That's probably just your easiest option. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with those. Just they snap right on a round barrel, which I think all of these had just a basic round barrel. I don't think they made these with a vent rib barrel. I could be wrong. I've never seen one that I can remember. So you just get the snap-on bead. It's like a piece of plastic that snaps on and gives you a good fiber optic bead on the front. And for this type of application, that's probably all that you need. Anyway, it lends itself again. It's a really cool gun project, and you can probably get them for not a lot of money. And you're talking about a straight utilitarian shotgun. It's a great utilitarian shotgun. They usually don't hold that many rounds. I don't know that I would recommend for a go-to tactical shotgun, but talk about you want one like a cheap, affordable truck gun that's not a fighting gun. You've got your SKS back there or whatever. You've got your AR as your go-to fighting gun in your truck gun, and you want just a good utilitarian, take anything in North America. A 12 gauge bolt action shotgun like this with a good assortment of shells. If it didn't take down the animal, you were either using the wrong shell or you didn't put the round in the right shot. You think about that amount of versatility from a dove to a grizzly bear that one of these guns can take down for, I don't even want to give prices because it'll vary depending on where you're at and how good a deal you get on one, but just really, these are not coveted guns. They lend themselves well to this kind of stuff. Also, if you are only going to get a few shells, like you're not going to shoot a lot, you have a go-to shotgun, this is going to be like a backup, you're going to get a box or two of shells. You might even get a better deal if you see one of these in 16 gauge, because 16 gauge is a really, really sweet gauge, and it's right kind of in the middle between 12 and 20, which is a really sweet spot, but they're just not as common. I think because military and law enforcement use 12, pretty much everybody gravitates towards 12. But 16 gauge was more popular decades ago, so you might find one in 16 gauge it's even better of a price because most people don't want a 16 gauge. But if you're willing to just get a couple of boxes, there you go. And oftentimes, if it's not a full-blown catastrophe, but an ammo dry up, which we've all probably lived through recently, the oddball stuff like 28 gauge, 16 gauge, stuff like that is often still on the shelf. So you're not going to feel bad about going out and shooting it, where you might not want to go out and shoot something else that you can't replace the ammo for. But, you go to Walmart and they got a bunch of 16 gauge, buy a couple of boxes and go shoot it. Anyway, just some thoughts and some cool things you can do with that gun. Now, if this gun is not your taste, don't worry, we're going completely opposite direction for the next one. Let's talk about a more tactical gun. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of really good deals on police trade-in SIG 226s and 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of 40 Smith & Wesson, but these are still a screaming deal. And the SIG 226 is arguably one of the best combat handguns, period, in history. And for the prices that these are selling for, it's a really good deal. I think it'll be one of those things we look back on, or you might look back on the prices these are going for and thinking, wow, I really should have grabbed one of those or a couple of those. They're just, again, the 226, it's legendary. And since the 40 Smith & Wesson has fallen out of favor, and in general hammer-fired guns have fallen out of favor for the cheaper plastic, fantastic polymer striker-fired handguns, these I think are really underrated and undervalued. Now again, I talked about 40 Smith & Wesson. Now, we talk about giving it a makeover. A lot of these, since they're police trade-ins, the vast majority were probably shot very little but carried a lot. So they're going to have some finish wear. Again, Dura-Bake, Dura-Coat, Ceramacoat, those are some really good coatings that you can refinish yourself. And if you've ever wanted to do the refinishing thing on a gun, this would be a good candidate to do that on, especially a handgun. If you're doing the baking thing and you have an oven, a lot easier to do that with a handgun than a rifle or a shotgun. So doing that with a really good durable finish, it finish, giving it a new kind of sheen. You could go with like a classic deep black or something like that, or you could give it, desert tan, whatever you're into. You could go two-tone, which would be really easy to do and look really good. Do the frame one color and the slide another. Also, since these have removable grips, you can do a lot of cool stuff with the grips too. There's a lot of different aftermarket grips. You can get some really good looking wood grips, which are just, if you want like a classic look, go for like a classic color with some wood grips. It's gorgeous. You want to try your hand at like wood burning, wood engraving. A lot of times, since these guns aren't as popular anymore, you can get really good prices on like not surplus, but I guess overstock wood grips. If you mess a pair up, then whatever, you mess a pair up. You want to try stippling? The factory grips that came on it might have a couple of dings and stuff anyway. Practice your stippling, and if you mess up the grips, it's not like a Glock where you're messing up the whole frame. You're just messing up the grips, and there's plenty of aftermarket grips for the SIG 226s, 229s. A lot of really cool stuff you can do there. Now on the 40 Smith & Wesson, you can either just get it and run it in 40 Smith & Wesson, or you can get a drop-in 357 SIG conversion barrel. Now I like 357 SIG. It's a great caliber. I don't think it should be your go-to carry gun unless you have some reason for that. But if you have a couple of 9mm and you want something a little bit more powerful for whatever reason, get one of those with a drop-in 357 SIG barrel. For the price you're getting for the gun, you add in the price of the barrel, it's still not a bad deal. You can do that. And this is where it comes in really handy if you reload. Now, I don't know why this is not more common, but I'm not going to give you exact load data, but this is a published load. If you look at the kind of power and velocity you're getting with bullet weights in 357 SIG, they're impressive. But if you hand load, this is a load that I have anyway, it's a good load. Again, I don't want to give out specific load data, but this is a published load. This is not going off the rails. Loading with long shot, staying inside published data. 135 grain bullet at well over 1,400 feet a second. Well over 1,400 feet a second. Those are impressive ballistics. Not a big fan of the 40 Smith & Wesson, especially in 180 grain load. But you start looking at that load and you realize if you reload, there's really no reason to go with 357 unless you want to, because it's a bottleneck pistol cartridge that has some advantages, but not for reloading. 40 Smith & Wesson's fairly easy to reload as long as you're not shooting it out of a Glock. Then you get the Glock bulge. And anyway, for this, that's an impressive load. 135 grains over long shot at over 1,400 feet a second. That load means business. And you might look at there's some really decent defensive hollow points in that 135 grain 40 caliber kind of genre there. So that's an impressive load. Also, what you can do, it's going to cost you a little bit more money because it's not just an easy factory part drop-in. At least I don't know that they made a factory option for it. You can get a custom barrel made for it, but it might be a little spendy. But you can get a 40-9 conversion, which is pretty cool. And if you think about that, if you wanted like a one handgun for the apocalypse, that's pretty intriguing because, again, SIG 226 or 229, they're legendary. Perhaps one of the best combat handguns ever made by human beings. And you could get one gun that fired 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, and 357 SIG. That's pretty intriguing. Now, if you go down to the 40 and the 357 SIG should use the same recoil operating system, the same mainspring, or not mainspring, but recoil spring. And the 9mm will have a different size recoil spring because it's a less powerful round. So you'll have to get a different spring as well, but even then, I mean, a spring doesn't weigh very much. You could keep all that in one little hard case with 3 different barrels and a couple of different springs. Ask me how I know. You got one handgun that'll fire 9mm 40 Smith & Wesson 357 SIG. And unless you're a machinist, you're probably not doing this yourself, but you can get them cut, direct cut for an optic. So, and it's 2024. So if it's gonna be a go-to handgun, there's a case to be made if it's gonna go in a bag or something like that. Maybe you don't want to run an optic, but if it's gonna be an actual carry gun for you in 2024, I'd really recommend you look at an optic. You can just have it direct cut for an optic, which I like better anyway than an adapter plate. So just some things you can do, especially with the deal you're going to get on one of those police trade-in 226s, 229s. I've given the website out. You can probably find it on your own, but I've given it out to the patrons. They've had it for a while, but there's a site that sells these for just really astonishingly good prices. These police trade-in 226s, 229s. Anyway, that's a really, really cool option. A gun that really lends itself to a makeover, do a new finish, maybe refinish the mags, custom stipple the grips, or get some really good looking wood grips, do some wood burning or some stippling, or just paint the grips and put a good looking finish on there. Anyway, it's a really cool option. Now let's talk about some World War I, World War II rifles. Here's what I am not telling you to do. I mean, it's your money, do what you want, but I do not advise taking a pristine World War I or World War II or interwar period or even Cold War pristine in original configuration rifle and then sporterizing it. I am not recommending that. I think that would kind of be a shame. Again, it's your money, do what you want. But here's the thing. Tons of these rifles have already been sporterized. They've already been, like, the original stocks have already been lost. They already have mixed match serial numbers where they've already, had the bolt handles bent, or they've already been drilled and tapped in the receivers. Things that will just destroy the collector value, especially on a real common gun like the Enfields or the 1903s or things like that. So if it's already been sporterized, it often, I think, will cost far more to restore it to the original shape, and in some cases you can't even do that. So I think if you want a really cool, like, old world craftsmanship rifle, get one that's already been sporterized and then make it how you want it. If you can find a really good shape old 1917, if you don't know, in World War I, our official rifle was the 1903 Springfield. However, we used more of the Enfield pattern of 1917 chambered in 30-06. There's a lot of those floating around, and there's a lot of those that have been sporterized. And since they're not like the pristine military collector grade guns, you can usually get them at a good price. And that's a really good, smooth, kind of known for being a smooth, fast-running bolt-action rifle that will probably, it's, generations old, and it will probably keep going for generations. You can find one of those sporterized guns and you want to modify it to your kind of taste, get one of those and Cerakote it. Again, if it's already been sporterized, don't get an original Enfield unless, again, that's your prerogative, but I'm not recommending you get a beautiful mint condition World War I 1917 Enfield and tear it apart and redo it. I'm saying get one that's already been sporterized, already been, the finish is already junk on it, it's already been cold blued, which generally doesn't look that good anyway, and refinish it with something good and modern that's, in my opinion, better, like Cerakote, Duracoat, Durabake. Take the stock. If it's a wood stock, a lot of those have already been cut down. Take it, hollow it out, glass bed it if you've ever wanted to get into glass bedding the stock. A lot of these military style rifles actually do better if you do like a full length glass bedding job. But look into that for yourself. Do some bedding work on it. I would suggest you sticking with cartridges that are still readily available, because you might think it's a really good deal, But if it's in some weird oddball caliber, unless you reload, again, if you reload, it opens up a lot of doors. But I just know from talking to the patrons, a lot of you guys out there don't reload. So if you don't reload, stick with a common caliber. Like the 1917 will be in 30-06, still widely available. Unless you live in like part of Her Majesty's old empire, I wouldn't recommend 303 British, not because it's a bad caliber, but because it's not gonna be worth it. The cost of the ammo, you would be better off just getting a more expensive rifle and a more readily available caliber if you're actually going to shoot it. Which I'm talking about gun projects for guns you're actually going to shoot. I'm not talking about getting a gun and restoring it to its pristine condition and putting it in a gun cabinet. That's just not my style. So get one in a common caliber. The 1903s you have to be careful with. Look up the serial numbers for yourself. The really, really early ones, Springfield did not do a really good job of heat treating, and it's not generally advisable and considered unsafe to shoot modern 30-06 out of some of the older Springfield 1903s. I think all the Enfield 1917s are okay. The older Springfields, though, are not with modern ammunition, so with that caveat, be careful. If you can find a good serial number, 1903, that's already been sporterized, those are fine rifles. Just, if it's got good iron sights still on it, I recommend, if you want to learn to shoot with good iron sights, those are kind of known for being just exquisitely well-built, accurate iron-sighted rifles. Here is one little special caveat that may apply to some people out there. Now, double check this for yourself, but I think guns made prior to 1898 are not actually considered firearms. They are considered antiques. And you don't have to go through all the legal things, and anyway, they're not considered a firearm. So all the laws that apply to firearms don't apply to the older antique guns. Make sure the gun falls into that category. It's not just like a model of, 1896, but it's actually produced prior to 1898. And you might think, why would I want a gun that old? Surely they're no good anymore. You can get guns that old that have been rechambered to, let's say, 308. Yeah, that's right. Like some of the old Mauser actions have been rechambered to more modern cartridges. And that old Mauser action is still a legendary action. Though they were making Mausers prior to 1898. Could get a bolt-action rifle in a modern caliber that's not actually considered a firearm. So, put that in your theological pipe and smoke it. Think about if that's worth it for you. But you might find one of those for a really good price. And if it's that old, it probably needs some TLC. And if it's been rechambered anyway, again, probably doesn't have much collector value. So if you can find one of those chambered in, 308 or 7 Mauser's not, super uncommon and it's a great caliber, that might be a really cool gun project. Another one I'm going to talk about, there are a lot of really cool Winchester 94s. It's kind of like the legendary American lever-action rifle, Winchester 30-30, and you usually think about the Winchester Model 94. Well, there was a budget version for a while because I think people were not willing to spend the money on the Winchester Model 64s. And I don't think you should get one of those and mess with it. You should get it and probably leave it the way that it is. But one that's not really collectible, one that I don't see coveted very often, the Winchester Ranger. It's a good, usable, serviceable, cheaper made, but still decent Winchester 30-30. Find one of those, you might think about refinishing it, redoing it. I believe they came with the ability to mount a scope, which is kind of one of those things they redid when they redid the model. So if you want like a really, really good hand-me-down, generational, exquisite piece of Americana lever-action 30-30, get a pre-64 Winchester Model 94. If you want practically, and as far as physics go, a good American-made 30-30 that will do everything that will do, but it's not a great collector's piece, so you're not worried about throwing it on the quad or throwing it in the back of the truck, and you want the ability to put a scope on it. Maybe it's already got a beat-up stock and a beat-up finish. you might look for one of those Winchester Rangers. Again, I don't think they're anywhere near as coveted as a Winchester Model 94. So that Winchester Ranger, you want to get one, you want to, hey, Cerakote it. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything heretical about, making it a modern gun or putting camo on it, putting a red dot sight on it or a prism sight or an LPVO. Especially if you live in a jurisdiction where you can't have a semi-auto and you just want a good intermediate cartridge. 3030 is a great cartridge, down and dirty, no nonsense, capable lever action gun that you're not afraid to beat up, and you want a little bit of refinishing work. Again, maybe Cerakote it, Duracoat it. You really may consider that Winchester Ranger. One of the things talking about a makeover, a lot of these, I don't know why, but it was the thing back in the day when you would go riding around in a truck, you would put your gun, not in a case or anything, just muzzle down in the floor of the truck with dirt and gravel. And that's really, really bad for a rifle. If you mess up the crown of that rifle, meaning where the rifling ends, where the bullet comes out of the barrel, that concentricity of the lands and the grooves is really important for accuracy. A lot of these have been really beat up. You can usually tell if you look at the end of the barrel and it's like worn on the end of the barrel. That's bad. I shouldn't have to explain that. But Brownells, and maybe other people too, but I know Brownells makes a recrowning tool. You can recrown, which is the part you care about. If the outside, the exterior of the muzzle is chewed up a little bit, not a big deal, as long as the crown is pristine. And you shouldn't have to cut in very far before you get a good recrown. If you're fairly competent with hand tools and you have a good attention to detail, you can recrown one of these old 3030s or many other guns. You may want to do this to the older bolt actions we talked about. But recrowning, get one of these old Rangers. It's likely to need it if it does. If it doesn't, don't mess with it. But if it needs a recrowning, recrown it. Refinish it, mount an optic on it. Anyway, just a really cool thing that you might consider doing. And there are obviously many other models, but those are just the ones I want to talk about today. Keep it a normal length episode. If you guys like this kind of content, I'm sure I could think of more models to talk about. If this is something you guys are actually out there doing and restoring guns, hats off to you. It's something that can be really rewarding. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, again, hopefully you're liked, subscribed, left a review of the podcast. If you've listened to more than one episode, please consider leaving a review, rating the podcast. If you want more and more insider content, consider becoming a patron. They get a lot of cool insider content that just doesn't go out to anybody else, but mostly because you like the show and you want to support it. It's like the old PBS ads, right? Supported by viewers like you. If you like this podcast, if you appreciate my time, consider supporting the podcast. Again, mostly because you appreciate the show, but also you get some pretty cool insider-only content. Anyway, with that, let's talk about the tactical tip of the day. Zip ties. And not for what you might think, like holding stuff together. Zip ties can make a really decent way to show that your gun is safe. Like a semi-automatic pistol, you take a bright colored zip tie, you pull the slide back a little bit, you put the zip tie in the barrel, and then you close the slide on it so you can look and see that the gun is unloaded. And if it's just for you, just one gun or two guns, you may just buy a chamber flag. But if you're doing a lot of guns or you just want to use a zip tie, a bright colored zip tie works fine. Like, I've been a professional firearms instructor teaching all kinds of classes and stuff. If you're going to have guns in the class where people have their guns out in the class, it really makes sense to have something like a zip tie in the unloaded gun so that you can look and at a glance know that that gun is safe. Now, obviously still pointing in the safe direction and all that stuff, but it's really just a cheap, easy, affordable way to get some extra safety so you can look from across the room and say that gun is safe. There's a big giant orange thing, and not only that, it can't be in battery because the zip tie is stopping it from being in battery, and it can't fire out of battery, and it can't chamber around with a zip tie in the barrel. You can do it with a handgun, you can do it with a bolt-action rifle, do it with all kinds of stuff. But anyway, just a bulk pack of bright-colored zip ties. That's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. This is a good one. I guess they're all good, right? It's the Bible. But I was reading this earlier today, doing a Bible study, and it just really struck me. It's not one of the ones I normally read or have memorized. O Lord, I will praise you. Though you are angry with me, your anger is turned away, and you comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid, for Yah, the Lord, is my strength and song. He has also become my salvation. Comments. He very clearly has become our salvation. The name Jesus means salvation. Jesus, Yeshua. There's, as I understand it, no J in Hebrew. Yeshua, which means salvation. He has become our salvation. God became man, became Christ, became Jesus, became Yeshua, our salvation. There's no God like our God, that humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross, who knew no sin, became sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. He became, he has become, he is our salvation. It's beyond complete comprehension, but it's worthwhile to contemplate. With that, thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.